Let's do it. Let's rip the Band-Aid, jump both feet in, dive head first, and talk about God. Stay with me now. I mean it. Let's have an honest conversation. This isn't about who is right and who is wrong, but more about opening up dialogue for what we think, believe, and know about God. More importantly, how do you view Christ? At 20, I guess I needed to get sober. I was headed down a self-destructive path, and the only answer I could provide myself with at the time was to attend Alcoholics Anonymous until further notice. 100% a non-believer at this point, but in recalling what my sponsor told me when I asked what kind of higher power I could believe in, or what it even meant to have a higher power, I find myself wanting to share her response with you. Meredith, if your higher power is that doorknob, then it's the doorknob. If you need to channel your sobriety through an inanimate object in order to stay sober, it's what you'll do. I can receive the idea of my higher power existing in a doorknob more easily now than back then. Why? Well, Christ, the Spirit, is in all things. If I truly believe Christ to be in all things, in all people, at all stages of life, then I must admit to myself Christ can and does reside in the most inanimate and animate objects. Sure, it might sound crazy to you, but take a moment. Pause reading the step outside, look up and down all around you. The birds are chirping, the sun is shining, the trees' leaves enveloping you in their shade. In this moment, Christ is with you. Christ was with you before you even stepped outside to do this exercise. Christ is in all things. Whether or not we see, hear, or believe is totally contingent to where we are in our path of spirituality. I really do believe that as the universal truth. Christ is in all things, even before we know, accept, and welcome Christ in our conscious state of living. How can I believe this? Well, how can I not? I believe in science. I believe in the Spirit. They contradict themselves at times, sure, but to me, accepting this reality is the beginning of living amidst our true self. When we can accept a contradiction and know it exists without harm, or maybe even reason, we are shifting our perspective. If anything, I believe that's a lot of what God asks of us anyways. Jesus never stopped to ask the Samaritan woman why she'd had 5 husbands already. He asked a question, she told him the truth, she didn't lie, she didn't omit anything, she confessed the reality. Jesus never said God got it wrong with Moses, guys, but instead said, the law says that, while I say this. When God visited Isaiah, he knew he was giving Isaiah the most impossible task. God already knew he would need to send his son Jesus to save the people of Israel. As much as Isaiah knew his mission wouldn't end the way he hoped, he persevered. He did his best. He obeyed. He didn't falter. He didn't try to make or take matters into his own hands. He trusted. He waited. He listened. All we can do is listen. All we can do is be present today, in this moment, right now, and continue the same presence hours from now. It's cool to think we don't have to go looking under a rock or on some crazy, treacherous mission to find God. Christ is already in us. He's awaiting our arrival. Like so many, I found myself wandering aimlessly, afraid of what will happen if. I'm not saying I don't have doubts or insecurities. I do. We all do. We will continue to have them even in loving and knowing and accepting Christ. When we wander, when we let our minds drift, we have to remember those innate abilities, the abilities which dwell within us all. God doesn't want us to be perfect. God wants us mid-ugly cry, splotchy face, and gasping for air. He wants us depleted. If he'd wanted us whole, well, there may have been a different ending to wandering the desert. The point is, he doesn't. If you're afraid because you think you're undeserving, you aren't. If you're afraid because you think you've made too many mistakes, you haven't. Being prepared, ready, and able is all that is required. We are prepared in our creation. All that awaits is whether or not you're ready and able to say, I can't do this on my own.